Chapter 14, Premonitions. Darn it, Bo, can't you just do as you're told for once? CPO scolded Bo as Prosper returned with him. You were gone for ages, Bo grumbled, and I was bored. He looked around, but Victor the pigeon man was nowhere to be seen. I had him in sight all the time, Hornet said, so calm down. What's in the basket? Bo poked his fingers under the lid, but Prosper pulled his arm back. It's a carrier pigeon, so keep your hand away from it, okay? Come on, let's go back to the Star Palace. CPO turned away from the big square and impatiently waved to the others to follow him. I haven't got much time today. What about the job? Bo called out, hopping excitedly after him. What do we have to steal? Calm down, Bo. Mosca put his hand over the boy's mouth. We don't know yet, okay? The Conte gave us an envelope, Prosper exclaimed quietly to Bo, but CPO wants to open it only when we've reached the hideout. And CPO is the boss, Riccio grumbled. His face was all gloomy, his hands dug deep into his pockets as he walked alongside the others, appearing far more interested in the pavement than his business with the Conte. And who was this Conte? Hornet pulled CPO's ponytail. She knew how much he hated that. Tell us about it, since we weren't allowed to come with you. What did he look like? Was he spooky? Mosca laughed. Spooky? No idea. We never saw him. Or did you see his face, Thief Lord? CPO shook his head. Prosper was walking right behind him, Bo's hand firmly in his, but he kept looking over his shoulder. Thief Lord. Prosper's voice choked with nervousness. You'll probably think I'm crazy, but... He looked around once more. The man on the square, the one who talked to Bo. Yes, CPO turned around. What about him? He looked like a tourist to me. I know, but on the way to the Basilica, perhaps Hornet told you about the detective who followed Riccio and me. CPO frowned. Yes. The man just there. Prosper desperately searched for words while CPO just stared at him. I think it was him. He really did look like a tourist, but when he walked away, Bo interrupted his brother. What detective? Prosper gave him a wretched look. They came to a bridge, and CPO coolly scrutinized the people pushing up the stairs behind them. You don't need to look as if it's the most stupidest thing you've ever heard, Riccio said. Victor the Snoop likes to dress up. Perhaps it really was him. And the pigeon man was called Victor, Bo interrupted him. He leaned over the balustrade. What? Prosper swung Bo toward him. What did you just say, Bo? A few gondolas swayed over on the river. The gondoliers waited for customers at the foot of the bridge. Bo watched with fascination as they tried to entice the passerby. I said the pigeon man's name was Victor, Bo repeated without taking his eyes off the gondolieri. Then he tore away from Prosper and jumped down the steps to watch a gondolier push his boat off its mooring. Prosper stayed on the bridge. He stood there as if rooted to the spot. Victor the Snoop, Riccio breathed. He stood on tiptoes and peered into the crowds moving toward the bridge. Prosper, meanwhile, turned around and ran after Bo. He pulled him away from the gondolas so violently that Bo nearly fell over. Then he vanished with him into the next alley. Hey, Prosper, wait, CPO called out before chasing them. He caught up with them after a few yards. What are you doing, running off like that? CPO scolded him, holding onto his arm. Bo freed himself from Prosper's grip and stood next to CPO. Come with me, CPO said, and without another word, he pushed the two of them into the nearest souvenir shop. Riccio, Mosca, and Hornet squeezed in after them. Act as if you're looking at something, CPO whispered. The shop assistant looked at them suspiciously. If that guy in St. Mark's Square really was that detective, then it won't do any good to just run away, he said to Prosper under his breath. With all those people around, you'd never notice him following you. He crouched in front of Bo and put his hand on his shoulders. That Victor, did he ask you any questions? He asked when you were feeding the pigeons back in the square? Bo crossed his arms behind his back. He asked me my name. Did you tell him? Hesitantly, Bo nodded. What else did you tell him, Bo? Hornet whispered. The shop assistant looked toward them more frequently now, but luckily a party of tourists came in and kept her busy for the time being. I don't remember, Bo mumbled and looked at Prosper. Did Esther send the detective? His lips began to tremble. CPO sighed and got up again. He looked at Prosper. What does this detective look like? But that's just it. The tourists turned around, and Prosper immediately lowered his voice. This time he looked completely different. He had no beard, and he wore glasses, and I could hardly see his eyes because he wore a cap. I only recognized him because he ran away. He moves his shoulders in a strange way when he walks, like a bulldog. CPO felt for the Conte's envelope. It was still tucked, unopened, inside his jacket. Then he looked thoughtfully through the shop window. If that really was the detective, he murmured, and if he really is following us, then we're leading him straight to the hideout, unless we can get rid of him first. The others looked at one another uneasily. Mosca lifted the Conte's basket and peered through the lid. The pigeon was growing restless in its prison. It's about time we let it out of there, Mosca whispered. It's probably hungry. Does anybody know what pigeons eat? Asked Bo. He just fed dozens of the creatures. Again, CPO felt for the envelope in his pocket. For a moment, Prosper thought he was going to open it, but to his surprise, CPO suddenly slipped out of his jacket, pulled the ribbon off his hair, and took the cap off Muska's head. Two can play at that game, he said, and pulled the cap down over his head. It's not that hard to change the way you look. He threw his jacket at Prosper. You stay here, Bo. You stay here, Bo. If the Snoop is really after you, then he's probably outside waiting for you to come out. You just stand by the window so that he can see you through the glass. Mosca, you take the pigeon and the envelope back home. Mosca nodded and, with great care, placed the Conte's envelope into his pants pocket. Riccio, Hornet. Scipio waved the two of them to the door. We'll take a look outside. Maybe we'll find him. What was he wearing? Prosper thought. A red jacket, light pants, and a weird checkered sweater. He had a camera around his neck, and he had glasses and a baseball cap with something written on it. I love Venice, or something like that. And his watch. Bo was nibbling his thumbnail. It had a moon on it. Scipio frowned. Fine. Got all that? Hornet, Riccio, and Mosca nodded. Then let's go. One by one, they slipped outside. Prosper and Bo watched them through the window. But he was nice, Bo mumbled. You never know right away whether somebody is really nice, Prosper replied. And you can't tell from the way someone looks. How often do I have to tell you that?